Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Gas Candy. So we got our budget Bel Air spun around in the shop, and we're gonna start replacing the floor pan and the rocker panels, and that comes in a variety of steps. The first one of which being we have to remove the front end. So we're gonna get to it and see how far we get. Okay, so we're gonna be removing this front end. We're gonna probably just throw it up on time lapse because it would be really tedious to watch two guys unbolt 1,000 bolts for about 4 hours. So here we go.
Yeah, I cut them off.
All right, I think the best thing to do for you to lift up, we'll get it up over, you go first, and then I'll follow you. That way you can clear all that.
Good. Keep going.
Oh, that's pretty heavy. All right, we just got the front end off, so now we're gonna start taking apart these rockers. We're gonna start with the passenger side because it's the worst. And if you're doing this in your garage, make sure you wear safety glasses. I'm not going to, but don't be stupid like me. Please protect yourself. Easy peasy. All right, so we got 2 plug welds here and here, I think, or yeah, somewhere. We're going to drill them out.
Might still be hooked right there. You might be right. Well.
Thank God we drilled those plug welds.
Last little bit's just got to hold on for dear life.
I'm telling you, I was like,
All right, we got to figure out how to get that little piece off.
Hi guys. So as I'm editing this video, I feel like there's a lot of missed footage and not a lot of explanation about what went on and how we're doing it. So here and there I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a little voiceover and I'm going to try to explain to you what we did and why we don't have any film of what we did. In this situation right here, we start cutting this rocker out, and as you can see, we run into a big problem with it not being able to get it apart. So it took us quite a bit of time of drilling and doing stuff like that because, again, I've done rockers, Vince have done rockers and floor patches and stuff like that, but this is the first time that we're going to do a full rockers, floors, almost all the structure in the vehicle. So there was times where me and him were talking back and forth, and we weren't really watching and really concentrating on filming stuff. we took off a long break, and I just don't think we've got quite into the hang of filming stuff. So right here, you're going to see this where we're cutting it apart, and then we don't show going and finishing it. And what we did is we just got it off there and got it off on the back, and we welded it in. And in the next shot, you'll see that we tell you what we're going to do with the driver's side, but we don't show us cutting it out, or we start cutting it out, and we don't show us welding it in. So again, like I said, you just kind of cut them out, see where they fit, and then weld it together where you can.
Well, I can't see them, but I think there was ones at one point.
Onto the driver's side. Now on this side, the whole rocker doesn't need replaced. So the structural part of it here and here is bad, but back here and up front is actually really solid. So I don't think there's any reason to cut the whole thing out, especially back here. There's no putty or like really horrible rust anywhere. It's all surfaced. And it still maintained its thickness. So I think the best part was going to be, we're just going to cut here, right above the flange, and then we're going to go up here, and I got a spot somewhere up here. I mean, it's pretty close, but, you know, hack, measure, install. Remember, measure once, cut twice. It's the next day, and my mic won't stay clipped to my shirt, so I got my homemade Bob Barker microphone. So we were able to get the rocker panel in on the driver's side. It did take a little bit extra to get it up front. We did end up having to use the entire panel up until we got to the back side of it. The back side was actually as structurally sound as I thought it was going to be, and we were able to use it. The only part that wasn't was the part up front, but no big deal. We just went ahead and took that thing completely out and then put the brace in, or the new rocker all the way up into its normal spot where it's actually supposed to be welded in. Once we did that, we had spot weld around the sides and spot weld around in the actual interior of it to give this thing the structure that it needs. The spot welded here, and all down through here, so this thing actually has really good structure. We were standing on it and it didn't go anywhere, so I have all the faith in the world that this is going to be okay. The passenger side, not so much. So we're gonna go ahead and put a brace in there and probably a brace across the back just to be on the safe side. So now that that's done, the next step would be, and the door shuts just fine. It doesn't need adjusted, but that's not because of what we did, it's because of what the door did. So the next thing that needs to be done is the motor and tranny's got to get pulled. So we can pull the whole floor pan out. Now I know what you're thinking, why would we need to pull the motor and tranny to pull the floor pan? Well, once we pull the floor pan out, we have to get the new floor pan in, and we're gonna can opener this style, which means we're going to leave the frame down and then leave the back two body bolts in and then lift up the whole front of the car like a big shark's mouth so that we can slide the new floor pan underneath of it and get it mounted to the actual body mount so that when we put it down, everything we can get, it'd be a lot easier to line it up doing it that way. And being that my lift is broken now and we won't be able to use it, we're going to use Old Faithful that we dug out of the woods, because I got the lift and I was like, I don't need the cherry picker anymore. So just goes to show how much I know. So we're gonna go ahead and start pulling the motor and tranny, get the dry shaft out and get it completely clear so that we can cut out the floor. Okay, so we went ahead and we started sectioning out the floor once we got the motor and transmission out. We took all the spot welds out, drilled them out on the trans tunnel because that's really the only solid piece of metal that we have left in the car. The toe boards are definitely gonna have to be addressed at some point, either patched or just flat out replaced. But the trans tunnel and the back along the sides is actually still really good metal, so we're gonna use it. So right now, we're just hacking and slashing the floor, leaving the structure in that we already welded in, and we're gonna see how far we can get. See how far we can get tonight before we can move on to the next step. Also, side note, when we took out the motor and transmission, we found out that whoever had this car last, or the person before him, or the person before him, at some point along the line, when the 350 and 350 turbo got shoved in here, I guess they didn't bother to find bolts, and they went ahead and just straight up welded the trans cross member in. So, good times. But yeah, so that had to be addressed too. But no worries, I got plenty of blades, plenty of death wheels, we'll be just fine. So we're gonna hack and slash and get her knocked out.
this is another one of those moments where a little bit of explanation is needed. So as you see, we're cutting up this new floorboard, which I know it was hard for us too. The reason why we're doing it is because, as you can see, the floorboard goes up and over and into the trunk area. Well, in order to get into the trunk area there, you're going to have to cut out an X brace that goes between the two wheel wells and down onto that lip there. Well, we're already cutting out a lot of the structure, and then we're going to pick the car up from just the front end. So if we don't have to cut that out, we really didn't want to. So what we did is we went to the back there, we checked it all out. It was really strong and solid metal. There was no rust, just a little bit of surface rust. So we ground it down, we tapped on it, we made sure it was good and solid, and it was. So now what we're doing here is we're cutting it off right there, which is close to where we're going to cut it off in the back. And then what we'll do is once we get it in there, then we'll make another cut to the original floor to make it match up with the cut that we're making right here on the new floor.
Okay, so now that we got the rockers in, we're moving right along to throwing the floor in. Now, we did a couple things off camera, cut a few things out of the floor, and just kind of basically made some overall room so that we can actually get the floor in. My voice is a little hoarse right now because it's just a lot of grind material in the air. I should be wearing a gas mask, but you know, you're not going to live forever anyway. So we got the chain hooked up where the air tubes would actually come in on the top. That's a good structural point to bolt to. We're going to go ahead and jack it up, throw the floor in, start making our final cuts and trims so that we can actually get it welded in today. Wish us luck. Okay, so we got the floor pan in, and it's actually making really good contact up by the front rockers that we replaced. We got a little bit of gap between the two trans tunnels, but that's to be expected because we cut the back of the floor pan here towards the rear because I wasn't going to cut through all that. That's just way too much hassle. So we cut it short to make it blend in, or to make it weld in with the bottom pan here. Now this is all really thick metal, so I'm not too concerned about it. The problem that we're running into now is that we have lip on lip, which is causing it to come up about 1/4 inch and knock everything else out of camber. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our line. I already have my line there to where the actual floor pan stops. We're going to cut in, cut up, and then cut straight across, cutting the bottom floor with the top floor so that it matches up perfectly. Whew. Okay, so after chopping up a $1,200 floor and getting in place, we took our last bit of trim off the back of it so everything matches up now. We did a little bit of finagling to get the body mounts in and get them set up. Now that we have everything prepped and ready to go, we already pre-drilled our holes for our plug welds for the floor pan. And since I've been laying on the ground for about 6.5 hours on the cold concrete, I'm going to graciously give the welder over to Dave and let him put in a few plug welds because what the hell is the point of having a partner if you can't utilize it? So he's going to plug up the the word's escaping me at this moment. The trans tunnel, and then once he gets done that, we're going to move to the back, and then there's going to be some finagling in there and a little bit of final fitting before you can do so. You don't think that when you do this you're just going to run and gun. There's a lot of little bit of here, a little bit of there, and as you go through it. So just keep that in mind if you decide to do this yourself. So all right, we're going to get to it.
After welding in that trans tunnel, we moved on back to the rockers. What we're doing here is we're trying to get them lined up because that pinch weld isn't quite right. So what we did is we got a block of wood on the jack, we jacked up on the rockers, and then we took a block of wood on the hammer and tapped it down so that when those two meet together, they're going to make a perfect seam and it's going to be nice and solid.
Okay, so fast forward 3 days and 2 change of clothes later, and the floor is magically into the car. We were going to record, and we tried, but the footage that we had, since me and Dave are of the Portly variety, there wasn't a whole lot you could see where we could get the camera to actually fill in the gaps of what we were doing. So we're going to go through it as we did it step by step. Once we got the floor in and in place, we still had the body jacked up because we did this total DD Speed Shop way. We went ahead and can opened the car open from the front end to the back. The back body mount stayed on as we lifted the car up off the frame. Slid the floor pan in, got everything kind of set. We did some rough cuts of the brand new floor pan so that we could set it on top of the existing floor pan so we could see where we need to make our final cut. Once we kind of had it in place, we put the new body bushings and the body mounts onto the floor to hold it in place so that we know that the factory spots line up and that is in fact where the floor needs to go. Once we did that, we started to lower the car down over top of it. We lined up our A pillars on both sides and lined up our B pillars on both sides. Now, when you're doing that, the floor and the body are going to want to occupy the same space at the same time as my light dies, and you're just not going to be able to do it. So once you start lowering it down, you have to take that into account and start making your cut as you go down. Cut a little bit, lower a little bit, cut a little bit, lower it a little bit, and as it sits, you'll start to see where there's a few places where you're going to have to make a few fine cuts and a few adjustments. You're not going to cut it right the first time, you're not going to cut it right where it needs to be, and you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to work it as you go. Don't think that you're going to make 1 or 2 direct cuts and this thing is just going to fall into place. It's not. You're going to have to adjust it as it's coming down. It's just the name of the game. As it's coming down, the places to pay attention to are the A pillars and the B pillars. They have to come down level. You want to make sure that the car doesn't shift to the left or to the right as it's sitting. These edges on the rocker panels on both sides should fit snugly or pretty close to the outside of the new floor pan. If you got a 1/4 inch up here or a 1/2 inch or whatever, there's something that's most likely off and you have to check the opposite side to make sure it's going down level. And again, you just adjust as it goes down. Now, that being said, the Titanic has nothing on the amount of rust that this thing had, which we started getting into once we started lowering the floor down. The toe panels, or the toe pads, were completely gone, disintegrated. There wasn't anything left. We had nothing to attach to, so they had to be dealt with. Now, we didn't deal with it before we put the pan on because we knew that we were going to have to use the pan, since it was all new steel, to get our placement right on the toe panels. So that's why the toe panels were ordered afterwards. The only places that we had to seal to were essentially around the trans tunnel and down here where the rocker panel meets the A pillar and the floor pan meets the A pillar. Once we had those in place, back here in the back of the car, this lower quarter was completely gone. There was nothing holding this quarter to anything. It was only being held on by hopes and dreams. So we made a small tab here and a small tab here just to reattach everything, and we used the door to hold the quarter panel in while we tacked it in place to make sure that all the other welds and all the other areas would line up. That was pretty tricky, and I still have a spot here that I have to make, and yeah, there's going to be a little bit more to that, and we can probably go into a deeper video on that to make these stupid pieces, because this whole thing right here, once we cut the floor, it was like a bat wing. It just wanted to go. So once we got that nice and solid, we went ahead and made our tack welds in the back along where we cut the line from the new floor to the existing floor. Now, if you do buy the one piece, it does actually come up over that dry shaft hump and actually goes into the back right before you get to the shock mounts in the rear. We didn't need to go that far because that's actually all really good metal, and to cut out the supports for the seat and everything, it's just a lot more work that didn't need to be had. The bolts came out for the body mounts just fine. We did have to make a couple little spots here around the wheel wells. Yeah, you know, what are you going to do? You're cutting and going, or you're cutting and welding at the same time. and just kind of making everything work. As long as everything stays in square and stays in reason, then you'll be fine. Don't worry about the booger welds. You can grind them down and do them over again. It doesn't matter. You're going to have a few spots where it's not going to be pretty. It just needs to be held in place, and then you just keep re-holding it in place until you get it to where everything is nice and solid. Once everything's nice and solid, then you can make it pretty. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now, because I am not the strongest welder. I definitely got a lot of booger welds around the toe panels, but they're in and they're not going anywhere. So I'll make them look pretty a little bit later on. Once we got all that done, we tied everything to the underneath of the floor pan, because these rockers actually go down. There'll actually be spots underneath that you can weld the rocker to underneath of the floor. So it's like two C's coming together, and it makes it super strong. This car has gotten all of its rigidity back and so much of its structure back. I am so psyched. While I was underneath working on the rocker panels, I actually went ahead, we cut off the original trans member the trans cross member that came with the car, since we're not going to be using that trans cross member anyway. And the last person that owned this car, they actually welded in a new trans cross member that was actually for like a 350 turbo, but instead of drilling it into the frame, they actually welded it on the sides. So we went ahead and cut both of those out, and I went ahead and smoothed out the frame to give us, we have a really nice trans cross member that I want to put in, but we need a nice clear spot to weld it to. So while I was underneath there, I just said, well, we'll just go ahead and we'll clear everything off. And that's what we did. So the next step will be to put a motor back in with the transmission and see kind of where we're at with the new ICT motor mounts that we ordered to get everything to work and fit the way it's supposed to. On top of that, we also have new steel for the door. We bought an inner door structure for this passenger side, because this passenger side is actually not that bad. We're going to cut that out, weld that in, and we have a new lower quarter for the passenger side too. That's got to go in. So again, me and Dave just kind of did this in our spare time in the evenings, and it took us about a week. Now, generally, it doesn't take people that have done this multiple times as long as it took us. But since this was our first time, we just figured it'd be best if we just kind of took our time and did it piece by piece and just, double checked, triple checked everything, make sure everything was going correctly. This is one of those things where if you are planning on doing it, it's definitely doable. Just take your time. Don't think it's going to go in an afternoon, you know what I mean? And definitely make sure you pace yourself. This is something that anyone can do with a simple knowledge of hand tools and if you know how to work a welder. And common sense goes a long way. So if you have those three things, you can do this. Just make sure you take your time. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for our floor install, our new floor install. We definitely got structure back in the car, which makes me very, very happy. As you can see down here, this is the part of the quarter panel that I was talking about that's going to need replaced, because it's already splitting out from there, and a few more things need to be done to make it straight, but I think we definitely got a good platform to do it. So next up will be fitting everything for the motor, and then maybe measuring a dry shaft. I don't know. We'll see how the motor and transmission goes, and then, like I said, we'll just keep going from there. It's just like big Legos. Piece by piece, we'll get there. But thanks for sticking around. Thanks for tuning in. If you guys want, go ahead and smash that like button. We'd appreciate it. If you want to subscribe. If not, hey, maybe next time. But until next time, we'll see you.